You got eye boogers. Hold still. Let me clean your eyes. Hold still, baby. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime.
Crue Trime.
Mary, say Crue Trime. If you are new here, hi, I'm not weird, I promise. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, you are in the right place. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification, and then that way you will never miss one of my terrible stories. Today's story was recommended by a lovely viewer named Karen Booker. Thank you so much, Karen. This is the story of Laurie Dann. Remember, I don't talk about any of the products that I'm using as I'm using them, so if you're interested to see what it is, just look down in the description box because everything is linked. And if something is no longer available because it's old as dirt and expired, I will link something similar. I am too close to this table. Back it up just a bit. Laurie Ann Wasserman was born in Chicago, Illinois on October 18th, 1957 to Edith and Norm Wasserman. Norm was a very successful accountant, and the family settled in Highland Park, which is a very affluent Chicago suburb on the north side. Laurie had an older brother named Mark, and their childhood was, pretty unremarkable. Typical. Well, maybe not super typical. They were very financially well off. Comfortable. Laurie was timid and shy, but a very pretty girl. Not a great student though. She was at West Ridge Elementary School and then Red Oak Junior High School. Not doing amazing, not failing, but not great. Murray, don't start. Murritz. No. So we now know that Laurie was suffering from some pretty serious mental illness, but her parents were in denial about it. They were also embarrassed and they did whatever they could to conceal it, minimize it. Shh, don't talk about it. So Laurie was actually showing some very clear signs of OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder from a very young age. And let's just talk about that for a second. When we talk about OCD, we're normally making light, like a joke, I'm so OCD because, I'm particular about the way I like things arranged. I'm very organized. I enjoy the act of organizing, cleaning, big Virgo energy.
Well, the end table is wrong, the couch looks bizarre, and don't even get me started on the refrigerator magnets.
But that's not really OCD. Real OCD is not rational. To be overly simple in explaining OCD, it's intrusive thoughts that are excessive and repetitive, and they inspire rituals like compulsions and whatever other actions. The point is they interfere with normal life. Did I just say a bunch of times? An example of these kinds of rituals would be things like hand washing, excessive hand washing, touching, tapping, checking, counting, arranging, hoarding. The act of not doing those things causes debilitating anxiety and fear, right? I know, it's not rational, and many of these OCD patients, people that suffer from OCD, they're very aware that their compulsions don't make sense, but they perform them anyway because it relieves, the stress or anxiety, whatever. It's a temporary kind of relief because the obsession just returns over and over. So in Laurie's case, she was obsessed with certain numbers and letters being bad or, good. And she believed that if she didn't do certain things, rituals or acts, that bad things would happen to her or to people around her. So when I say numbers being bad, I mean you have to do things a certain number of times, and it would have to be 3 times, for example. And if you did it 4 times, you have to start over. You get what I'm saying. Anyways, so people with OCD aren't typically homicidal. It's actually very clearly the opposite of that. People will spend their lives stuck in these patterns for fear that, deviating from it, it's going to hurt somebody else. Step on a crack, break your mama's back. That's OCD thinking. So the psychiatrists that either worked with Laurie or later studied her case all agree that the OCD was not a causative factor for the rest of this story. She definitely had some other undiagnosed things going on as well. We'll get there. Growing up, Laurie loved being alone. She lived for the times in her teens when her parents would go away on vacation and she was allowed to stay home alone. She wasn't throwing parties or, having boys over. She was just Turtling. Relatable. She attended Highland Park High School for her first 2 years, but then later transferred to New Trier East High School in 1973, at the same time that her parents moved to a large new home in Glencoe, Illinois, a different neighborhood. So Laurie didn't have a lot of girl friends, but she was pretty popular with the boys. She dated throughout high school, and she actually had a couple of serious boyfriends over the years. Laurie graduated from New Trier High School in 1975, and she barely squeaked into Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, intending to become a teacher. Laurie was actually only at Drake University for her freshman year, and then she later transferred to the University of Arizona. She wasn't there to be a serious student, she was there to catch a man. So she changed her major from education to liberal arts. She pledged the Alpha Delta Pi sorority. Then she changed her major again, this time to home economics. She eventually met a fella, a pre-med student, ooh la la, and they got pretty serious for a time. So Mr. Pre-Med didn't love that Laurie wasn't super serious about her own studies. Laurie just loved the idea of being at college, but not necessarily the actual studying part. She was also the kind of girl that became all about the person that she was dating. Her life revolved around him, and to the point she would skip classes to play house, cooking, cleaning, for the boyfriend. So Laurie was with Mr. Pre-Med for about 2 years. She really thought that, they were going to get married and she was going to be a doctor's wife. But she was very possessive and demanding, and Mr. Pre-Med was over it, and he broke up with her. Laurie didn't take it super well, and she ended up leaving the University of Arizona and moving back home with her parents in Illinois. Laurie was described as somebody that saw the world in black and white, right and wrong, and she definitely held grudges, which is a characteristic of BPD, borderline personality disorder.
Really? Well, then I guess I'm in big trouble.
So even the very smallest slight would get you on Laurie's list.
He's filed under cocksucker in my little black book.
In 1977, Laurie started classes at the University of Wisconsin as a home economics major, dropped out pretty quickly after that. She was kind of ping-ponging between her parents' home in Illinois or some college town apartment that they'd pay for. There were times that she would take a job as a waitress. Her OCD was also getting worse, and it was starting to make it hard for her to work. Laurie's OCD started out small. She didn't like the number 7. She was obsessed with the letter L. She had a fear of contamination, which, caused her to wash her hands excessively. And then when that wasn't enough, she started wearing gloves or pulling her sleeves down over her hands to touch things like light switches, even in her own house. So Laurie's family and boyfriends just sort of saw these as Laurie's quirks, idiosyncrasies. My idiosyncrasy is I can't pronounce words. The point is they didn't view it as some kind of signal of a mental illness, nothing to pay attention to. While Laurie was working as a waitress at a TGI Fridays, she met a young man named Russell Dann. So Russ and Laurie had a lot of things in common. They were both the youngest children of wealthy Jewish families that lived on Sheridan Road. They both had trouble early on in school. Russell struggled with dyslexia, and, Laurie was just not into it. They had also attended many of the same schools. I just think maybe there was an age difference, so they weren't in the same classes. Anyway, when they met, Laurie told Russ that she was a graduate student in nursing at Northwestern, that she was doing surveys for women's projects part-time and was, working at TGI Fridays, which we know not true. Laurie's OCD was also definitely showing, but Russ viewed it, again, as quirks and superstitions. For example, at stoplights, Laurie would open up the car door and tap her foot on the pavement. She would also refuse to close the cabinet doors in the kitchen, just little kooky things. So Russ was actually working at his family's insurance brokerage firm. He was a very successful executive by this time. He had a brother and a sister, nieces and nephews, a very close-knit family. They were also very welcoming and outgoing, friendly bunch. You know, they accepted Laurie immediately. When Laurie and Russ got engaged, Laurie told him that she was going to go ahead and just leave school for now while she planned the wedding, which was very convenient and clever excuse since she wasn't enrolled in school at all. Their wedding was a pretty small affair, you know, mostly because Laurie didn't have any damn friends. After they were married, they bought a house and moved in together, and, you know, right away, Laurie was having some pretty serious issues. Her OCD, by this point, probably many other things that were undiagnosed, started to become unmanageable. Laurie wouldn't let Russ leave for work before she got up and touched the sofa. She was afraid something terrible would happen to him. Could not organize the house. You know, she was terrified of moving any of the furniture around. She was just like in a spiral. One day when Russ came home from work, Laurie had taken all of their clothing out of closets and dressers and piled them all up on the bedroom floor. All of them. She said that she needed to do laundry, but you know, couldn't figure out what to do. So Russell sat with her and helped her separate the clothes into appropriate groups. Which ones hang up, which ones dry clean, which ones go in the dresser, blah, blah, blah. Another time when Russ came home from work, Laurie had cleaned the house and had dinner almost ready to go, which was really nice. You know, she was making progress and getting herself together. She told him that she had done the laundry. Isn't that nice? And when he went into the bedroom to change his clothes, he noticed that there was like water all over the floor by the dresser. And Laurie had washed all of the clothes, taken them out of the washer even before they spun, so they're soaking wet, folded them, and put them away in the dresser. What? There was also another incident where Laurie hid in a closet and then jumped out with a pair of scissors, like to attack Russ. Anyways, it was getting really bad, and Russ insisted that she needed to see a doctor, obviously. So the psychiatrist told Russ and Laurie that her issues stemmed from childhood and revolved around her upbringing. When relaying this to Laurie's parents, they shut it down immediately. Laurie's fine. She'll be fine. She's always been fine. They also didn't believe in any of that mental health mumbo jumbo, you know, psychiatry, any of that. The point is, you know, not helpful. Well, sadly, but, you know, obviously, their relationship, the marriage, deteriorated. Russ seemed to be supportive of Laurie. He told her that he made plenty of money, she didn't need to work. He suggested that she focus her attention on doing things that she liked, like, you know, helping people. So why don't you go volunteer at a charity? And Laurie got into it, you know, for a time, but Laurie felt like the only way that she could be right is if she was like Russ's sister who worked. I think Russ's mother also worked, and there was some kind of weird competition, at least in Laurie's view, between them. Well, finally, Russ couldn't take it anymore, so they split up and he took her back to her parents' house. Laurie actually picked up a new, or, you know, maybe an old reincarnated compulsion where she started prank calling everyone she knew. So she would call and hang up, you know, sometimes over 20 times in a row to one person. Most of these people figured it out, you know, or they knew who it was. But this was 1985, okay? Caller ID did not exist. Russ, of course, was getting the same treatment from Laurie, but then she ramped up this bizarre behavior and she started calling the police on him. In April of 1986, she accused Russ, by telling the police this, that he broke into her parents' home and vandalized it. Well, the cops, you know, after they responded, they caught on pretty quickly, and she eventually moved on to harassing other people. But then on May 10th, 1986, Laurie Dann purchased a Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum handgun. Apparently, when Laurie made this purchase, whatever paperwork came with it accidentally got mailed to her former address, Russ's house. Russ went to the police immediately. I mean, it's very alarming that this woman, who's obviously very mentally ill, now has a gun. They tried to convince her to surrender the weapon to them for safekeeping, but she refused. Russ pleaded with Laurie's father, Norm, who said it was perfectly legal and she had every right to have a gun. By the way, most of these prank phone calls were like call, hang up, but sometimes she would make threats, kind of how some of the people caught on to who it was. Well, Laurie's prank phone call rampage continued, and in August of 1986, she tracked down Pre-Med, the boyfriend back in Arizona, ex-boyfriend. She called him and told him that she was pregnant with his baby. She hadn't been anywhere near him for like years, so obviously he didn't believe her, but Laurie started calling the hospital that he worked in and said that he had raped her while working in the emergency room. She sent anonymous letters that were later traced back to her describing this, and she was giving details about his body that only somebody who had seen these bits would know. Anyways, she terrorized him, and also any girlfriends that he may have had, people that he worked with, everything. And he reported it to the police, who, did nothing. And also, again, the prank calls and all that stuff, not necessarily caused by OCD, but Laurie was detached from reality. Sometime in the late night hours of September 30th, 1986, Russ woke up in his apartment in terrible pain. He stumbled to the bathroom and then found that he had been stabbed. Not funny. When he came back to the bedroom, he found an ice pick that had been thrown partially under his bed, and he called the police. But when they heard his story, they didn't believe him. I mean, spoiler alert, it was Laurie. She got into his apartment, stabbed him with an ice pick while he was sleeping, and then, ran away. Nobody believed it. And nothing was done. So after the stabbing incident, the phone calls continued. Laurie was calling Russ's friends and family. The police finally did something in November, and they arrested Laurie for making harassing calls, but the charges were dropped, citing lack of evidence. In January of 1987, Russ and Laurie's divorce was tracking towards getting finalized, and they had agreed to split the money from the sale of their house. So Laurie got a pretty decent payout. And that explains also why Russ was in an apartment. Russ also agreed to pay Laurie a very hefty spousal support sum for the next 3 years. So later that year, an episode of 2020 aired a special on OCD. Laurie's parents, Edith and Norm Wasserman, after seeing that episode, finally started to come around to their daughter's obvious condition. They finally got her lined up with a physician in Madison, Wisconsin at the university who was doing a study on OCD. They sent her up to Madison and put her in an apartment in like the student housing area, which is a little weird because if you're not a student, can you live in student housing? Well, remember, Laurie didn't really have any history of mental illness because she had never been treated or sought any kind of exams or anything like that. So whatever else might have been brewing was not revealed to the doctor that was leading the study. The point of that is that part of the OCD experimental study involved some experimental drugs that may or may not have exacerbated or triggered some of the other underlying conditions. We don't know. So back to the OCD study. So yes, there was some experimental drug therapy, and then there was also exposure and aversion techniques that just weren't going well, to be honest. She was still having intrusive thoughts and compulsions, and she had taken up lying and vandalizing and stealing, things that didn't make sense for somebody with means. She came from a rich family, she had money, she had no reason to steal or lie in those ways. She was very sick. And I'm leaving out a lot of these details, obviously, but Laurie got into a lot of trouble with stealing and making threats and just lots of not good times. In March of 1988, Laurie stole arsenic and other chemicals from a lab at the University of Wisconsin while in Madison. She was seen doing this at the time, but they didn't realize what she had taken or who she was. And I forgot to add that when Laurie was in the middle of the divorce and living at home, she had started babysitting for local families in nearby Winnetka, another Chicago suburb. She was very good at compartmentalizing and could pretend, to be normal for short periods of time. And Winnetka, interesting little nugget, is the location of the Home Alone house. It's a very fancy suburb of Chicago, very idyllic, affluent.
Stereos, VCRs, toys.
Silver tuna. You know what I'm saying. On May 20th, 1988, the now 30-year-old Laurie Dann delivered Rice Krispie treats in juice boxes that were laced with arsenic to many places, including fraternities, sororities, current friends, families that she babysat for, like over 20 different places. The treats and juices were so watered down that nobody was seriously injured. Nobody died from it. She went to the home of the Rush family, a family that she had been babysitting for quite a long time. She had arranged the day before to pick up 2 of the youngest sons and then take them to a carnival at the hospital that didn't exist. She drove the 2 kids to Ravinia Elementary School in Highland Park, which is where one of Russ's sister's children attended. She left the 2 Rush boys in the car, entered the school through a side door, and then placed an improvised bomb she had made. Luckily, the thing was extinguished. It was noticed pretty quickly, and I guess there was like some part of it was on fire. Anyways, they put it out, nobody was hurt, and they didn't even realize who had left it or what the intentions might have been. Next, she went to the Young Men's Jewish Council daycare and tried to enter with a container of gasoline, but was refused. She did leave a Mickey Mouse cup of milk laced with poison. No one was hurt. I think there was somebody that she thought attended that daycare or something. You get the motivation. Remember what I said about holding grudges? Stay with me. Stay with me. Next, she returned to the Rush home and told Marion Rush, the mother, that she had the wrong day for the carnival. Oops. So she tried to give the boys the poisoned treats and juice, but they spat it out immediately because it tasted terrible, so they were fine. Nothing happened to them. Marion was down in the basement that day doing laundry, so Laurie sent the boys downstairs because she needed to go back upstairs to get a surprise, and as she went, she sprayed gasoline all over the carpeted steps, lit the steps on fire, locked the doors, and left the house. Marion was able to break out a window in the basement, luckily, and got herself and the kids to safety, no injuries. And they were actually worried about Laurie being, who they thought was trapped upstairs. Her next stop was Hubbard's Wood Elementary School in Winnetka, where the 2 older Rush children attended. With her 3 totally legal handguns, she had 3 guns now. With her 3 totally legal handguns, she entered the school through the gym side doors, and over the next 11 minutes, Laurie opened fire on 6 children, killing 1 and injuring 5 others.
Apparently just walked in the classroom, went past the teacher that was there, indicated that the gun was real, and began firing at random.
Then she got back in her car and drove off to escape, or attempted to. So Laurie actually tried to leave the area, but there was a funeral procession going by, blocking the way, so she ended up fleeing on foot. She found her way to the Andrew residence, where Ruth Ann and her 20-year-old son Andrew were home that day. Philip was a student athlete at the University of Illinois. He was a relay swimmer, and he was getting ready for his summer job with the Cook County District Attorney's Office. A very sweaty and upset and disheveled and covered in blood Laurie Dann just let herself in through the side door. She told them that she had just been raped and she had shot and killed the assailant, but she was afraid of the police, and she was just out of sorts, out of her mind, obviously. Well, Philip tried to reason with her, saying that he could help, let's help, we can help. Laurie made it clear that these people were her hostages, and she was waving her guns around. Even though they could have called the police, the Andrews didn't, because they thought that Laurie seemed scared, not dangerous. So Philip was trying everything he could to get Laurie to surrender the guns, right? Hand them over, please. Didn't work out, but he was able to get her phone number of the parents. He thought that speaking to them would maybe help the situation, but not so much. Laurie basically told her mother Edith that she had done something horrible and that she was going to have to take her own life. And then when Philip got back on the phone, Edith was so completely detached from the situation that she asked if he would just please see that her daughter got home safely.
That makes no fucking sense.
Edith! Okay, well, he asked Edith if she would please come over to, help diffuse the situation and take a cab if she had to, and she said, no, I can't. Cool. A police detective who had worked with Laurie's ex-husband Russ soon made the connection between the fire at the Rush home and the shooting at Hubbard Woods School. Remember, Russ had been begging to get the guns away from Laurie, and there were the weird threatening phone calls and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, around that same time, the police arrived at the Andrew home, and so did Laurie's parents. So when Edith was speaking with the police officer, she asked what Laurie was facing, as in jail time. They said she's going to get the help that she needs, but Edith said, this sounds terrible for a mother to say, but she's in so much trouble, I think it would be better if she didn't come out of this alive. Wow, Edith. To a separate police officer, her father, Norm, said, if this is Laurie and she did this, my life is over. Nice. So nice. Okay, so back inside the Andrews home, Philip is trying to reason with this blood-soaked lunatic in the kitchen. Laurie admitted that she, in fact, had not been raped and had done something awful at a school. At around 11:30 a.m., Laurie pointed the gun at Philip and fired. He fell backwards into the pantry, but he was able to kind of scramble out the door, and then Laurie was alone in the house and had gone upstairs and barricaded herself in a bedroom. The police tried for hours to reach out to her, having her father Norm try to get on the phone. They were using a bullhorn, all these things, but they were never able to connect to her. And at 7:30 that night, a team finally breached the home, and it took them a while because they weren't sure if she had booby-trapped it. She had left a bomb at this other school, she had let this other place on fire. Guns. Also the poison. She had obviously been making some plans, so they were being cautious. Once inside, they did find Laurie face down in a pool of her own blood, having shot herself in the head. So the Wassermans, Laurie's parents, were later sued by Philip Andrew and the 5 surviving children based on their negligence of Laurie's firearm purchases. She had actually used Norm Wasserman's credit card to purchase these firearms, and the parents, remember, had given misleading, incorrect, whatever information about her condition to this psychiatrist that was doing this OCD study. By 1991, all of the cases were finally settled out of court, so not many details are actually available, but we do know that the Wasserman's insurance covered all the payouts. So there's that. The shooting at Hubbard Woods School totally rocked the community of Winnetka, Illinois. They later renamed a local park in honor of the boy who died that day, Nicholas Corwin. Philip Andrews survived his injury, and he eventually became a lawyer and then later joined the FBI, specializing in hostage negotiations. He's also done many talks about handgun laws, and in 1989, after this case, the Illinois General Assembly made some sweeping gun control reforms to prevent firearms from getting into the wrong hands. And that is the story of Laurie Dann. Again, if you want to see any of the makeup that I used in today's Luke, just look down in the description box for the link. Click it. It'll take you to go see it. If you have a Crue Trime story that you would like to recommend to me, I would love to hear from you. So also down in the description box is a link to a Google Doc to collect all of the dirty details. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube most weeks, most Thursdays, and you can follow me on most of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! Okay, so, well, I didn't put my eyebrows on. The Illinois available, but Murray! Huh? Come here, baby. Do you guys want to see Murray? Murray, want a greenie? Murray. Let's have a greenie. Cat crunch ASMR. Thank you. Hi. Thank you.